Gone online. Welcome to Sri Guru Namaha. Welcome to our 32nd online Saturday Kashmir Cultural Heritage Series. Our speaker today is Professor Meem Zaffar, and his topic is Kashmir's spiritual tradition. We start with a prayer song by Sai Sankaran. Sai is known to us and has already appeared in our program. He's joining us from Noida. Sai,
Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaskar. My name is Sai Prasad and I am a disciple of Srimati Ambika Srikant. I would be reciting Brahmanyanavalli. Asangoham 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 Punah Punah Satchidananda Rupoham Ahamevaham Avyayah Satchidananda Rupoham Ahamevaham Avyayah Nitya Shuddha Vimuktoham Nirakaroham Avyayah Bhumananda Swarupoham Ahamevaham Avyayah Ahamevaham Avyayah. Namaskar. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Please, Shanti, please continue.
Can you hear, Professor?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Unfortunately, my video is not working.
So let us manage with whatever is available.
Can you hear me?
Yes. You are audible.
Yeah, I'm sorry about this. Today, we are in 3 different locations, so we will get this started. Anyway, you are going to be the speaker, and people don't need to see me in any case.
Okay.
Okay, we will get. Shall we get started?
Yes, of course.
Okay. We have already finished with the prayer song.
Yeah.
Our speaker today is Prof Meem Zaffar, and his topic is Kashmir's spiritual tradition. Now, we thank Kanchi Mutt for our ongoing series and offer our namaskarams to His Holiness Shankara Vijayendra Saraswati Swamigal. Sri Kanchi Mutt has always been in the forefront, modestly working with the sole aim of national integration, spiritual enlightenment, and preserving the uniqueness of Kashmir, as Kashmir is our cultural heritage. I am very pleased to introduce Professor Meem Zaffar, the noted educationist, researcher, poet, and literary critic. Now, former director, Institute of Kashmir Studies, Kashmir University, former visiting professor at Center of Philosophy, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, former visiting researcher at the Department of Education, University of Macerata, Italy. I see this university as one of the oldest in Europe, founded in the year 1290. Professor Zaffar is widely traveled, awarded, and has contributed numerous articles, research papers in the prestigious national and international magazine. Professor Zaffar is proficient in Kashmiri, Hindi, Persian, Urdu, and yes, Sanskrit. Today's topic, Kashmir's spiritual tradition. Professor, I just wanted to highlight a few things as you are joining after a long time, and you probably wouldn't have seen any of our videos. Just wanted to highlight, we have done 31 series so far.
Okay.
The focus is always on creating awareness and cultural heritage.
That's great.
We had distinguished and eminent speakers, including Kashmiri Pandit community. The take-home point from on all these 31 lectures so far is peace-loving,
Yeah.
coexistence, tolerance, harmony, and inclusiveness. This inclusiveness is always a key, which is cutting right to the heart of the matter with clarity and courage. And with the same inclusiveness, we have Professor Meem Zaffar among us. I have been to Kashmir many times and always stayed in a Muslim guest house. Hamid Butt has taken us to so many temples that not many would have seen. When I mentioned this to Professor Zaffar, he is so kind to invite me to come and stay with him next time. It is nothing new having Muslim scholars among us. We could name President Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, our ex-Chief Justice of Madras High Court, M.M. Ismail, a great Tamil scholar. He had several meetings with Holiness Mahaperiva. During my initial discussions with Professor Zaffar, that itself was a fascinating long session. He mentioned that he would take a neutral stand in his presentation today and not to lean on anything but Kashmir Saivism. This is what we follow, and we are just presenting the awareness. Professor, I heard in one of the intros in Sheetal Nath conversation that you sent to me,
Yeah.
you mentioned that you are a learner and
Of course.
should have discovered all these topics much earlier.
Yeah, of course.
You also mentioned that if someone is more knowledgeable and wanted guidance, and if there are mistakes, not to get angry.
Yeah.
As we always say, let noble thoughts come to us from all directions.
Yeah.
It's all a great learning experience. We want to thank Professor Zaffar once again for appearing in our program and want to hear from him too. Over to you, Professor.
First, my namaskar to all the audience and the people who are there with you. You see, Kashmir's spiritual tradition, it is a huge ocean. And I am not a great swimmer. So I don't know how many drops I would be able to bring to the notice of our audience. I will start with a shlok. In Kashmiri, we call it shruk of Nundrishi. This is in nutshell the spiritual tradition of Kashmir. The shlok goes, I'll first read it in Kashmiri, I utter it in Kashmiri, and then I will give it its English translation. Poziod bozak pas numrak, natmaz numrak dapak nemaz, shivast shunis, yod mul karak, sedio soiche vantar nimaz. If you are a seeker of the truth, bend the five. By implication, bend your five senses. Get your senses under the supervision of your Atma, under the supervision of your soul. Your senses should not be allowed to do whatever they would like to do. They should be under the supervision of your soul. If you are a seeker of the truth, bend the five. Otherwise, you bend your body and call it nimaz. Nimaz is the Muslim prayer. Otherwise, you bend your body and call it nimaz. Shivastu shunis yod mul karak. If you are able to fuse Shiva and Shunni, that indeed is the inner nimaz. Now, here is a Muslim rishi, Muslim saint, a Muslim sage who defines nimaz as a function of Shiva and Shunni. Nimaz is equal to Shiva into Shunni. This is what we call Kashmiriyat. This is our spiritual tradition. So I'll talk about Nundrishi in the course of my lecture, but I wanted to introduce myself with this shlok, this auspicious shlok. So actually, Kashmir's unique identity and essence can be delineated by identifying and foregrounding its metaphysico mystical traditions like Rishism, Buddhism, Shaivism, and Sufism. They are ideal frameworks to give it a locally rooted global identity. You see, actually, from the 6th century up to the almost 12th century, Kashmir were considered to be the seat of learning and knowledge in this part of the world. Throughout Indian subcontinent, it was known as Shardapeet, that is the abode of Saraswati, goddess of knowledge. The fourth Buddhist council was convened in Kashmir sometime in the first century AD. See, convening of this international conference in Kashmir is very important because it shows, although geographically Kashmir is on the margins of the subcontinent, but from the point of view of spirituality and knowledge, Kashmir was at that time center of the learning and knowledge. Kashmiris have contributed greatly to the Buddhistic tradition, Buddhistic logic, and they have also played a very important role in the propagation of Buddhism in the country and abroad. See, actually, in Kashmir, many things have been going on right from Buddhist times. Because actually, all the spiritually inclined people would travel to Kashmir because it was in Himalayas. And they thought that this is the right place for meditation and spiritual efforts can bear fruit there. So this was a place, this was a melting pot sort of. But from what I said, from 6th century up to 12th century, Kashmir was a very productive and creative place. It was like Athens of subcontinent. It was not only in metaphysics and spirituality that great personalities emerged, but also in many other fields. We have great luminaries during this period of time. We have a logician like Jayant Bhatt, and we have grammarians, we have dramaturgists, we have aestheticians, we have medicine people. And you see, this is an aside, but so far as Indian theory of knowledge is concerned, Indian epistemology is concerned, so we consider Nyaya to be the school of epistemology in Indian tradition, in Indian philosophy. But its foundation was laid in Kashmir in the text of Charak Pandit, Charak Pandit's Charak Samhita. There is a chapter on epistemology. See, Indians have been able to develop a theory of knowledge only in two sciences. One is medicine, the other is grammar. Unfortunately, this tradition could not go to other disciplines, but that's not our subject here. So what I am trying to communicate is at this stage, before the advent of, before monastic Shaivism became popular in Kashmir, Kashmiris were mostly Buddhism was prevalent here. As I said, that not only the Kashmiris have greatly contributed to the growth and spread of Buddhistic religion and philosophy, their mentality has also been informed by Buddhism. That impact is still there. So the Buddhistic impact you can find in the present times in Kashmir society, Muslim society. So actually, you see, we have learned the lesson of the importance of silence from Buddha, maybe 2500 or 600 years earlier. There is a Western philosopher, very famous philosopher, whose name is Wittgenstein. He concludes his book, Philosophico Logico Tractatus, with the sentence, whereupon we cannot speak, there we should pass in silence. So, this silence is very important, very significant. There are certain realms that cannot be articulated in linguistic categories, especially in Buddhistic perspective. The ultimate reality is beyond Chatushkoti. That means we cannot say about it, it is or it is not, or either it is or it is not, or neither it is nor it is not. So nothing can be predicated about the ultimate reality according to Buddhistic perspective. But still, Buddhism gave us the concept of nirvana. Now it is a realm that is beyond the categories of language. You cannot define it. It's a realm that has to be realized. And what is this? This is a state of shunyata. This is a state of non-being. How do you realize? How do you realize this stage? It can be realized. The Buddhistic perspective to the divine is a negative perspective. You have to go by negation. So you have to arrive at the ultimate shunyata. You have to eliminate all the predicates one by one. So ultimately you will reach that stage, which is shunyata. So you will, in order to know yourself, you have to realize the principle of shunyata, the principle of non-self. The principle of non-self is what we call nirvana. When you realize the nothingness, absolute emptiness, absolute non-being of yourself, then you are at the stage of nirvana. So, but see, we have postulated these realms which cannot be, but our wise men have just indicated about them. They have hinted at them, although they cannot be articulated in language. But our ancestors have hinted at this kind of thing. See, even a 20th century Kashmiri poet says, "Chu or kehnai tu yor kehnai, bakehnai kasvanai kehnai." So this means this verse means that on each side there is non-being. On every side, on either side there is non-being. And I too am nothingness. On either side there is non-being. Nothingness is all pervading. I am mere nothingness. How can nothingness be communicated, and to whom? Now, this is a 20th century Kashmiri poet talking like this. This means that Buddhistic approach of realizing the ultimate reality, ultimate truth, has settled its impact on Kashmir's spiritual tradition. So, this is the way that we have evolved. So there are so many things that can be said about the presence of Buddhistic motifs in Kashmiri society, Kashmiri literature, Kashmiri language, Kashmiri ethos. For example, I'll give you an example. In Kashmir, when there is a disaster or when there is a death in the family or somewhere or something happens unfortunate, then we say that dunya is a tawnun bazar. When we translate it into English, it means world is a marketplace of suffering. This is a self-evident truth for every Kashmiri speaking person. And where does it come from? From Shaivistic perspective, Shiva is Anand. This universe is the prasar of Anand. And from Islamic perspective, man is the creation of God and he is the best creation of God. So this motive has come from Buddhism. Similarly, we say here, in unfortunate situations, dunya chun kihin or insan chun kihin. World is nothing. Man is nothing. These again are not the thoughts that we can derive from Shaivistic spiritual discipline or philosophy. Neither can be these inferred from Islamic doctrines. They come from our Buddhist past. So there is a lot of influence on Kashmir's spiritual tradition of Buddhism also, because basically, you see, all the traditions, spiritual traditions, they have many things in common. The ultimate truth, you may have a different path, but you have to reach the same height. You have to reach the same point. Your ultimate goal is the same. So, as I was saying, that there is this foundation of this spiritual tradition is laid by Buddhism. And Buddhism had become very technical, very logical. So actually, what was happening in India, all over India, is that there was a huge debate. We used to call it Shastra between different schools of philosophy. And in this churning of the ocean, different philosophies would come up. If you read any text of Indian philosophy, original text, you will find that there is a Uttar Paksh, then there is Khandan, then there are Purv Paksh. First there is a Purv Paksh, your opponent. You state his position. This is the position of my opponent. And then Khandan. Then you demolish his position. Then Uttar Paksh. Then you respond to these questions. What is the actual position? What is the actual doctrine? What should be the actual doctrine? So this has been going on for a lot of time. And since Buddhists had developed a strong logic, and Buddhism was very prestigious philosophy and religion in Kashmir also. So when Buddhism declined and Shaivism became prominent, so Shaivists, in order to establish themselves, had to defeat these Buddhists on logical grounds. So although for both schools of philosophy, experience is the first thing, but you can elucidate that experience through logic, deductive logic, and experiential logic. So there was this dialogue going on between Buddhists and Shaivites. So in this way, Kashmir Shaivism, which has many branches, was informed by Buddhist logic. It had great influence of Buddhist logic and Buddhist philosophy also. So Kashmir Shaivism became more prevalent from, it was earlier also there, but it became more prominent from 9th century. Actually, it started from 7th century, but from 9th century, it became very prominent. So the first, actually, as I told you, that people were coming from all over the subcontinent. Now what we call now Afghanistan, even Central Asia, this Pakistan, this Bangladesh, our country, India. Now this was whole. this whole chunk of land was Bharat. This was Bharat, and people were coming from all parts of the this part of the world for their spiritual well-being to this place, and they would have their own gurus. So there were lot of sects, lot of gurus, and lot of disciples. They will work with them for their spiritual well-being, for their spiritual evolution, in order to recognize themselves, in order to recognize the purpose of their life, in order to recognize the ultimate reality. So there were the different sects, but it was not theorized. So what was this knowledge was from person to person. This was a personal engagement, as happened in arts also. So if you had a dance master, he will take some students and he will teach them how to dance. And there was no theory at first. Now there is theory in dance also. So, but it was Somanand. Somanand wrote first philosophical text, semi-philosophical text of Kashmir Shaivism, that's called Shivdrishti. This was 9th century. At the same time, there was another great rishi whose name was Vasugupta. And it is said that he had a dream in which Shiva appeared to him, and he directed him to go to a place in the foothills of this Mahadev, and he was told that there is a rock, and on that rock there are some sutras written, and he was required to copy those sutras and then teach them to those people who were in search of self-knowledge or the knowledge of the Lord. So this man, he was living around there near Mahadev foothills, and he went there, he touched many rocks, and then he touched a very big rock, and it turned, and there were these sutras, and he copied them. They are called Shiv Sutras. They are called Shiv Sutras. That place is still there. There is a sanctuary. It is called Dachigam Sanctuary. So anyone who wants to visit this place can go there, but one has to seek the permission from the forest department, because it is under the control of the forest department, and you can go there and you can sit there and you can have that kind of peace of mind, and you will be transformed. There are vibrations there. Of course, there is nothing written on that stone now, on that rock now. It is a very big stone, inclining on a stream of water, very pure water, very cold water. So I have been there once or twice, but I don't have the eyes of the rishi. Maybe the slokas are already also still there, but I am not that evolved. I am not that liberated. My wheels have not been removed, so I could not find anything written there. But I invite those of you who can afford, and when you visit Kashmir, you can also go there. That is a very peaceful place. So that is the place where these were revealed. And this is a very marvelous book. These are 77 sutras, and but this is not theorization. This is sutras. You know what is a kind of sutra? Sutra is a very dense verse. Is kind of a riddle. It's kind of a codified language that needs interpretation, that needs understanding. An English scholar has called them frozen pieces of enlightenment. So you have to handle them with care. You may be injured if you don't know how to defreeze them. So this was a very important book, and this was Vasugupta. And on the theoretical side, our first theoretician is Somanand. And then there was Somanand's disciple. Somanand is like an intoxicated person, rishi. Sometimes he says that Shiva is everywhere. What I have to teach, what I have to say. You can't see, you can't experience. So that kind of thing, but there is some logic also. And he is very harsh with opponents, especially with grammarians. He says, "Oh, what is your job in this? Why are you coming in Brahma Yagyasa? Your job is in the field of language. Why do you put your legs in this kind of affair? You are not qualified for that." But his disciple, Utpal Dev, was more respectful to these grammarians, and he tried to establish his philosophy and collaborating with those grammarians. And it was Utpal Dev who gave us first theoretical book from which we have derived the name Pratibhigyan, recognition. Pratibhigyan, Pratibhigyan Karika, Ishwar Pratibhigyan Karika. And he wrote a commentary on it that's called Vritti, and then he wrote another commentary on it that's called Vivritti. After that, Abhinav Gupta wrote two commentaries. One is called Ishwar Pratibhigyan Vimarshini. It is on the text. The other is Ishwar Pratibhigyan Vivarti Vimarshini. It is on the bigger and larger commentary of the Karika, which was written by Utpal Dev. So the name Pratibhigyan comes from Utpal Dev Acharya. So Abhinav Gupta was the person who popularized this philosophy, who gave a philosophical grounding to all this. So incidentally, let me tell you that Abhinav Gupta was a polymath. He was a great aesthete. He had written a commentary on Dhanyalok Lochana, and he has written a huge and long commentary on Bharat Natyam that is known as Abhinav Bharati. So unfortunately, we are not conversant with our past, with our tradition. So that is, we don't know even the names of the books that our ancestors have written and left for us. You see, Abhinav Gupta has written almost 70 books. I am really surprised. 10th century Kashmir, how cold place it must have been at that point of time. When I compare present Kashmir to the Kashmir of my childhood, I'm amazed. See, in those days when I was a child, we had in Srinagar 3 or 4 feet snow during the winter, and this will happen 3, 4 times. And roads would be closed for weeks together. But now we don't have that kind of snow. Now imagine what would have been the condition in 10th century when most of the Kashmir was a forest. And how without any source and we have electricity also, we have computers also, earlier we had typewriters also, we have libraries also. See, this is something marvelous. See, I am presently reading a book called Nyay Manjari. It is by an author. It is a book on logic. So it is by an author called Jayant Bhatt. He was a scholar, 8th, 9th century and during the reign of Shankar Varman. And Shankar Varman had appointed him as the head teacher of the Royal Institute of Learning. But towards the end of his reign, he became very cruel. He taxed the people in every way. He started looting the temples and other sacred places. And he was so cruel that no one was able to oppose him, to criticize him, to raise a voice. Now this man, Jayant Bhatt, he spoke against the ruler, against the king. and he got his reward. He was removed from the institute and he was placed under prison. He was sent to a prison. Now that prison at that time was a cave. He was put in a cave, and a huge stone the cave was closed by a huge stone, and there were one or two gods who were there. Now this man wrote this book that is about 3 volumes in that cave, and it is such a fascinating book. And he has quoted from many of his opponents and scholars of his own tradition. He has pointed out that sting alone, it is all his own resources. So this was in 9th century. Now how he managed to do this, only God knows or he knows. But when you read this book today, you feel amazed. So now what I am saying, that this was the kind of atmosphere in which that at that level during this period from 6th century to 12th century, Kashmir was undergoing churning, and this kind of atmosphere was coming up. So now we have talked about, now then after Abhinav Gupta, he has also, see, actually Kashmir Shaivism has, its literature is divided into 3 categories. One is Agam Shastra. It includes Agamas or Tantras. The other is Ispand Shastras. And the third is Pratibhigyan Shastras. See, about Agamas, there is this belief that they are revealed texts. They are not the products of human mind, human thinking. But Ispanda Karika, Ispanda Shastras are those Shastras who try to explain rationally the content of some of these tantras. And Pratibhigyan Shastra are those books which are trying to establish this doctrine as a philosophy, as a rational doctrine. And these Shastras try to justify whatever they say through logical reasoning, through experiential reasoning, through scriptural reasoning, and they are trying to do that. Now, to cut a long story short, after Abhinav Gupta, as I told you, he has written almost 70 books, out of which almost 40 have come down to us. Rest is lost in the harshness of time. And of Khemraj, who was his student. He has written some commentaries, and he has written a summary of Ishwar Pratibhigyan Karika that is called Ishwar Pratibhigyan Hridayam. I have translated this text into Kashmiri, and I have translated Siva Sutras also into Kashmiri, for which I have got a Sahitya Academy Award during the year 1914. It is a translation award. So what I am saying is this, that we have to know our tradition. First thing is to know our tradition. And the second thing is to evaluate it critically. First thing is, see, any tradition can survive only when you examine it critically at different points of time. Because with the evolution of time, with the changes of time, there needs to be these scriptures, these texts need to be reinterpreted. So when Abhinav Gupta was writing about this Bharat Muni's text, Bharat Natyam, so he says that there are already many commentaries there. Then you will ask, why are you writing another commentary? But if you find, when you read this book, if you find that I have repeated whatever others have said, I have repeated the same content, and I have repeated it in the same fashion. You please burn this book. Now, that means he was giving a new interpretation to all this. He was giving a rational interpretation to Bharat Muni's text. So that is what is needed. But that can be done only when you have mastery over the text and the tradition. So let us come down now a little bit. So, and there is another, to put the facts in a historical perspective, we have a famous commentary on Abhinav Gupta's Tantralok by Jairath. It is in 13th century. And then there is another commentary, it is in 17th century by a scholar called Bhaskar. His commentary is called Bhaskari. It is very famous. Now that means up to 17th century, the tradition was still there, Sanskrit was still there, and this was continuing. The tradition was continuing in Sanskrit also. But what happened? See, actually, Islam came to Kashmir around 12th century, 11th, 12th century. And over a period of time, Kashmiris lost the grip on their language, that's Sanskrit, because of so many philosophical, linguistic, religious, spiritual, and so many social reasons. They lost the grip on Sanskrit language. And whatever their ancestors had bequeathed, it became inaccessible to them. But fortunately, there is a person who has taken the essence of all the spiritual tradition, not of logic and other things that were produced in Kashmir, especially spirituality. That was Lalit, 14th century. Now, she was a phenomenal person because she revolted against the tradition. She expressed her ideas in Kashmiri language. She articulated this lived philosophy. She had lived it. Maybe she had studied it also, but she had lived it from her own experience. She articulated this philosophy into Kashmiri language. She brought it down to the common man. So it was no longer a preserve of Sanskrit academia. So Lalit was a rebellious person. So now these people who were the custodians of tradition and knowledge, they were afraid of her because she was against all inequalities and she was trying to remove all those structures which stifle the human spirit. So what to do with this lady? They declared her to be insane, to be mad. That is the reason we don't find any mention of Lalit in the subsequent texts that were written during that time in Sanskrit. There is nowhere mention for 200, 300 years. Only in 17th century, there is a Persian chronicler who mentions Lalit's name. Now, Lalit has survived because of her poetry or because of her verses. I don't call it poetry because it's a different, it was a message, it was a divinizing message. So people heard her and turned her words into chants and mantras that are being sung even today. So this was a great revolution. I think in the history of Kashmiri culture, there is no parallel to it. She was the person who first rebelled against the academia and communicated this philosophy, this tradition, this culture, this spirituality into Kashmiri language, the language of the man in the street, and made it available to everyone. But the Sanskrit Pandits, they called it Rahasya Sampradaya. This is a secretive doctrine. But when she articulated in Kashmiri language, there was no this. She deconstructed the myth of being a secretive doctrine, and she did another thing. She rejected all the ritualistic aspects of Shaivism, and very furiously in her vakas, I can read those vakas, but we don't have that time. She rejected all the rituals that were attached to Kashmir Shaivism, and of course, rituals are attached to other religions also. So she was totally against all those rituals, and so this was also a very great thing. So this was you see the hegemony of the priests was challenged. So she was someone who was against the establishment, against the status quo. So that is why she was declared to be mad. Now, let me first, before talking about this journey more, let me in brief, in a nutshell, share with you my understanding of what Shaivism, monastic Shaivism is. Monism is a doctrine that accepts that there is only one and only one reality, that is Shiva, or good, or goodness, absolute goodness. And this goodness, this good, is Prakash Vimarshmai. It is that light which is conscious. It is conscious light. So this conscious light, you see, you can understand, and you see this table before me is unconscious. It cannot move of itself. It cannot go anywhere. It cannot desire to have something or express something. But I am there, but I will feel after some time, I will feel tired. I will feel like having a cup of tea. I will feel like talking to someone. So consciousness emerges, consciousness floats, consciousness manifests. So this Vimarsh, it is Prakash Vimarshmai. It is that light which is conscious. And this consciousness is the power of this light. This is Shakti. And this Shakti, at a certain stage, overflows and is manifested in the form of this universe. The human mind or human consciousness is a kind of shrunken it is absolute consciousness in a shrunken form. This shrunken form, but it is the consciousness. It is the ultimate consciousness. It is the ultimate truth, but it is in shrunken form. So what one has to do in Kashmir Shaivism is that one has to recognize oneself as the absolute consciousness. That's why we call it recognition. This is the absolute intrinsic value for Kashmir Shaivism is self-recognition. You have to recognize yourself as a ray of that light. You have to realize that you are one ray of that light, and you are the light. You are the source of the light, for which Kashmir Shaivism has given some upayas. And because of they say that we are not able to do this thing, to recognize ourselves as essentially absolute consciousness, because we have three mallas. three impurities are there, because of which human consciousness, which is a shrunken form of absolute consciousness, becomes shrouded or becomes veiled. They are Anvamal, Mayyamal, and Karmamal. Anvamal is the choice of Shiva when he manifests himself in this manifest way, in this plurality, in this multiplicity. Now it is his choice that he makes you shrunken. Now the second mal is Maya mal. It is because of Maya. Maya has five kanchukas: Kala, Vidya, Rag, Kal, and Niyati. Now these five kanchukas shroud your actual essence, and that is why you are not able to recognize yourself. And the third is karma mal. That is because of your karmas you create mal, impurity, and that's why you are not able to perceive yourself what you are as what you are. So these malas, human beings can make an effort to remove these malas. And for these, Kashmir Shaivism has given upayas. One is Ana Upay, the other is Shakta Upay, the third is Shamba Upay. And there's a fourth Upay that's called Anupai. That is pathless path. Now, if somebody, see, and human effort can only remove two impurities, that is karmamal and mayyamal. But in order to remove anvumal, you need to have the grace of the Lord. We call Shakti path. So unless and until one has the Shakti path, one cannot be liberated, one cannot recognize himself, one cannot recognize the Lord. So this is what Shaivism means to me. So you have these paths, and they see this Pratibhijna Hridayam of Khemraj. These are 20 sutras. In the 18th sutras, he gives you different methods, different practices, which you can adopt, which you can exercise, which you can try, and you may be able to transcend your individual self. And there is another tantra that is called Vigyan Bhairav. In that, 112 practices are given, and if you follow those practices, you would any of them, or maybe whatever practices you choose out of that, that might help accelerate your journey on the path. The first thing is to be on the path. So you see, when I was talking about you about Shiv Sutras, now the first sutra says Chaitanyam Atma. Chaitanyam Atma. Now, this is the first text of Kashmir Shaivism. This is our first text. This is our first Granth. And it starts with consciousness. Consciousness is the soul. Our consciousness is the essence of reality. And the second sutra is Jnanam Bandha. Discursive knowledge or knowledge through the senses is a cause of bondage. But if you read these two sutras together, Chaitanyam Atma Jnanam Bandha, if you translate it into English, it becomes the essence of reality is consciousness. And one who does not know this, one who has not experienced this, is in bondage. Now, examine ourselves. When we examine ourselves, for us, the material world is more real. For us, material world is more real. then ourselves. See, we are not talking of English consciousness, because in English, when we use the word consciousness, it is already a relative thing. I am conscious of something. But here we have consciousness as a substantive. It is the name of a state. It is the name of a state of being. It is the name of a reality. Fortunately, in Kashmiri, we have a word that translates it exactly. It is Chet. It is not a relative word, it is a substantive word. Chetana. So, in order to realize this Chetana, you have to adopt a discipline. And that discipline is given in the texts of text of Shaivism, monastic Shaivism. So if you are interested, you can, all these texts are available in English translations also. But the impact of this as I quoted Nundrishi, now I'll quote some contemporary poets, 19th century, 20th century, who are Muslims by religion, who are Muslims, now how they handle this tradition. There is a poet, Sufi poet or mystic poet called Rahim Saib Sopur. He says, Shiv Rahiman Lob Shiv Gashas, Om Pan Khara Ras, Om Dipthi Sul Me Vas Vas, Havas Lagya Navas. Shiv Rahiman Lob Shiv Gashas. Rahim found the Shiv, or Rahim discovered the Shiv in the light of Shiva. Om Pan Khara Ras. By taking the thread of Om gradually and slowly. Om Dipthi Chol Me Vas Vas. When I recited Om, all my apprehensions were gone. Havas Lagya Navas. I feel like sacrificing myself in your name. And at another place, he says, Nal Rahmas Shastar Chuye, Taj Shastar Chui Deen Daran, Be Aras Arno Chiye. In Kashmir, we call this tradition Shastar. Shaivism is called Shastar. So he says, Taj, Taj, Taj Shastar Chui Deen Daran. Taj is the crown of faithful. So this is Rahim Sab. And there is another poet, he is of 20th century. Rahim Sab is of 19th century. 20th century, he says, Netrav Chetan Yanmale Buzum, Man Raj Suzum Anand Het. Zanmav Nirit Prakash Vuzum, Man Raj Suzum Anand Het. Netrav Chetan Yanmale Buzum, since the day I heard the consciousness through my eyes. I heard the consciousness through my eyes. Since the day I heard the consciousness through my eyes, the Lord of my heart is steeped in Anand. Zanmav Niris Prakash Vuzum. When I crossed this ocean of birth and death, then I encountered divine light, and the Lord of my heart is steeped in Anand. And another verse of Samadmir is that Kam Krodh Loob Moh Dui And Trovum Sharir Banovum Chet Zagret Sopun Sushupt Turya Tuzum Man Raz Suzum Anand Het. Now, just to tell you, this man was totally illiterate. Samatmir was totally illiterate. Now see how beautifully and seamlessly. He weaves these very refined concepts of Kashmir Shaivism into his poetry. काम क्रोध लूभ मोह दुई अंत्रोवुम शरीर बनोवुम सेत जागृत स्वपन सुषुप्त तूर्या त्यूजुम मन राज सूजुम आनंद है. Calm, desire, krodh, anger, lobe, greed, calm, krodh, loob, moh, attachment, and by fear, I put aside. Calm, krodh, loob, moh, dui antrovum, sharir banovum set zagret. I transformed my body into conscious, con, co- awakening consciousness. And what happened as a reality, as a result? Sopun sushupta turya tuzum. Now the states of Sopun, Sushupta, and Turya were sharpened, and the Lord of my heart is steeped in the Ananda, in Ananda. So there are so many poets like that who carry on this tradition that we have inherited from our ancestors. But this is very unfortunate that we have not been able to grow as we wanted to grow. Unfortunately, our language, Kashmiri, was removed from schools in 1953, wherein it had found its place after centuries of banishment. And it was there just for a couple of years, and it was removed from the schools. And that is why most of the Kashmiris, educated Kashmiris, are not able to read and write Kashmiri. If I offer my book to someone and without any payment, I will give you free, but he will say, I can't read Kashmiri. This is our tragedy. This is the reason why we have lost our roots. So now this new education policy has come, and it emphasizes on mother tongue. I don't know whether it would be implemented in this territory or not, but we are hopeful that something good will happen. So this tradition is not dead. So when I translated Shiv Sutras, I explained it with reference to the poetry of these mystic Kashmiri poets. And when I translated the other one, Ishwar Prativigyan Karika, I again explained it with the help of the poetry of Kashmiri mystic poets. So I tried to demonstrate that these texts do not belong to the museum, although they come from 9th century or 8th century, but they are still living in the blood of Kashmir. So this is to be recognized. And see, this is I can recite you so many poems, so many shloks, which tell you. See, actually, I started my conversation with Nundrishi's famous shuk. Poziod bozak paans numrak, natamaz numrak dapak namaz, shivast shunis yod mulkarak, sedio soiche vantar namaz. If you are really a seeker of the truth, bend the five senses. He uses the word only five, but we have to understand what he means. You have to bend the five. That is, you have to bring the senses under the control of your Atma. They should be directed by your Atma. Poziot bozak paans numrak natamaz numrak dapak namaz. Usually in namaz we bend our body. So he says natamaz numrak dapak namaz. Otherwise you bend your body and call it namaz. That's no namaz. Shivastu shunyas yod mulkarak. Siddho soiche vantar namaz. If you are able to fuse Shiva and Shunya, that indeed is the inner namaz. Now, this is that you have to go beyond duality. You have to go beyond being and non-being. Then only you will be liberated. Laldet similarly says somewhere, Div vata divar vata, heribonchu yikwat, Poos kas kara khoot bata, kar manast pavna sangat. Div vata, the idol is but stone, and the temple is but stone. Whom will you worship, O Pandit? Whom are you are going to worship? Whom are you going to worship? You fuse your pran and your man, your breath and your heart. You fuse together. That is the worship of the Lord. Here you have again to transcend the duality. And when you transcend the duality, that is the path to liberation. So, although you see, actually, in Lalded, there is hardly any mention of namaz or anything that belongs to Muslim culture. But now, when Nundrishi says that if you are able to fuse Shiva and Shunya, that indeed is the inner namaz. Now, see how seamlessly he has integrated and mingled these concepts belonging to different traditions. And what a music they create. He creates a new aesthetics. See, Buddhism has so many branches. In philosophy also, in religion also. But there is one concept common in all of them. That is the concept of shunyata. Similarly, Shaivism has many forms. You have Shiv Siddhant in the south, you have Veer Shaivism, you have Prajapati Shaivism, and you have this monastic Shaivism of Kashmir. But one concept is common among all of them, and that is Shiva. Now, what does this Rishi say? Shivastu Shunis Yod Mulkarak. At the linguistic level, also, you examine this shlok. Shivastu Shunis Yod Mulkarak. Siddho Soiche Vantar Nimas. That indeed is the inner namaz. So, you see, actually, liberation according to Shaivism, and I think according to Sufism also, liberation is to be attained in this life only. There can't be any liberation after death. She says, Shivchui Zayul Zal Vahrevit. Kranzan Manshi Terit Kyat. Zindanai Wuchan Adakate Merit. Zindanai Wuchan Adakate Merit. Panamaz Pan Kad Veserit Kat. Shiva is separate. Shiva is like a fine net. Shiva is separate everywhere. And in every cranny and in every atom, Shiva is separate over there. If you are not able to find him while you are living, how can you find him when you are dead? And in some other place, she has said that Adupul Rabimas Lalipamposh. After this kind of discipline, I had a flower in the mud. A flower bloomed me in the mud. That is, you have to start with crude reality, material reality, Mayic reality, and you have to work on that. And when you work, when you cultivate yourself, when you purge yourself of these things that are stopping you from enjoying the bliss of the consciousness, so then only flower will emerge. Then only there would be a flower from the mud. Mud is this body. So in this human body, you can have the flower if you work for that. See, actually, one aspect of Kashmir Shaivism is that it does not make a watertight compartment between bhok and moksha. It is bhok moksha. Through Bhog, you can attain moksha. Bhog is no hindrance. And for Kashmir Shaivism, this universe is the manifestation of Shiva, manifestation of good, manifestation of the absolute reality. So it is also absolutely true. So actually, this author of this Karika, Ishwar Pratyabhigyan Ka, Utpal Dev, he has written some hymns also, and they are called Shiv Sutra Vali. In that, there is a beautiful line, beautiful verse, where he prays to God and says, "Oh Lord, please give me that status, give me that position, that and I can enjoy anything of this material world as I enjoy your company." So so this world does not disappear. When you become realized, this world does not disappear, neither does disappear your body. You can be a Jivan Mukt if you can perceive this universe in its true form, in its essential form. So if, only then will you enjoy the bliss of consciousness. And in Kashmir, you see, I would like to point out another thing that is not very much connected with my talk, but I would like to draw your attention to that aspect also. You must have heard the name of famous Greek philosopher Plato. He has given a theory of ideas. Now, according to him, the blue is in this world. Blue things are in this world because there is an idea of blue in the world of ideas. He conceives a world of ideas. There is an idea of blue in the world of ideas, so we have blue things in this world, and they are more or less blue. The perfect blue is only the idea of blue. Now he says that there is a hierarchy of ideas. You see, color is the more general idea. We have many colors. The idea of color. From the idea of color comes the idea of blue, idea of green, idea of yellow, idea of purple. This. And then color also comes under a higher category. That is, we can say that these are sensory ideas. Now, in sensory ideas, we have so many. We have ideas of taste, we have ideas of hearing, we have ideas of sight. So, and then again, you see, it goes up. So, the ultimate idea, according to this logic, should have been the idea of being, because everything comes from being. Most general idea is the idea of being, and everything comes down from being. Everything emanates from being. Specific beings come from general being. But he says that the most general idea, dominating idea, is the idea of good. Is the idea of good. Everything flows from good. Repudiating his own logic. But what our ancestors have done, there is no coincidence between Plato and, say, Abhinav Gupta or anyone else. We have also called this ultimate reality good. In Urdu, I will say, he is Noor-e Mutallak. And at the same time, he is Khair-e Mutallak. Absolute good, absolute light, absolute beauty. So actually, this synthesis of these things, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram, this was established by Kashmiri aestheticians and metaphysicians. During those days, drama was at its highest in Kashmir. Poetry was at its highest in Kashmir. So those are not my fields right now. I cannot talk about everything. So, but because they helped to realize the ultimate truth, which embodies them all. They are the aspects. Beauty is also the aspect of the ultimate truth. And truth, beauty, and goodness. Why Plato preferred goodness to being? This is a question for you. You ponder. And our ancestors have said that this is from which everything emanates. Sometimes I say there are only 35 categories. Shiva is the 36th. From Shiva, everything emanates. But there is another stage that we call Anuttar or Param Shiva, who is Vishwotareen. And this, beyond this world, beyond this universe, beyond the creation, Shiva is beyond the creation. God is beyond the creation. And God is eminent also in the creation. God is present in the creation. You have to realize God through this manifest world. You have to realize God through these manifestations that are before you. So that is the path. That is only through Bhog can you attain moksha. So this is a nutshell, and these thoughts have come down and they have been mixed with the Islamic thought also. So therefore I have tried to put in nutshell. I told you that it is a huge ocean, it's a large ocean. So I can only talk about few drops. So I have tried to bring those drops before you. I hope you will enlighten me if you have anything to say about. If you have any questions, you can ask me. As per my epistemic level, my level of knowledge, I will try to respond to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. You mentioned about your level of knowledge. We have seen all that now. It is the ocean. And you try to put it. I just quickly want to read some comments. I don't think you can read this. A beautiful presentation of Kashmir Saivism vis-a-vis Vedanta. How many of us can match his learning about absolute reality?
Thank you.
This is
Thank
from
you.
Advocate Adi Swaminathan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Another one, liberation. S.A. Srinivas Sharma.
Yeah,
Liberation is to be attained in this life, so nicely said.
Okay. Thank you.
There is another one, Sarala Jagannathan. Mir Sahib, amazing talk. You literally served a linguistic and philosophically rich feast. Cannot thank you enough for this. Can listen to you for hours. My humble namaskars to you.
My
I
namaskar
think,
also
Professor
to her.
Zaffar, I didn't mention the time to you. Otherwise, you would have stopped earlier.
Yeah. I
But
would have stopped.
it is good that you extended beyond our normal hours.
Okay.
And it's very fascinating. And I don't think we have time for a question, and maybe we will have to plan another slot for you. And the books you mentioned, if you could quickly talk about the books, maybe there are some phone calls to me asking about the books.
No. Actually, you see, these books I talked about, all the books that I talked about. You see, actually, Somanand has written Shiv Drishti. It has been translated, I think, some portion of it by an American into English, not, I think, whole book. And then there is Utpal Dev's Somanand's Shiv Drishti, and then there is Utpal Dev's Ishwar Pratibhigyan Karika, then his commentary on it, then in his bigger commentary on it, that's called Vivarti. Vritti and Vivarti. And then Abhinav Gupta has written two books on it, Ishwar Pratibhigyan Vimarshini and Ishwar Pratibhigyan Vivarti Vimarshini. And then there is this famous text that's called, that is included in the Agmas, Siva Sutras. And then there are so many other Agmas, I did not name them. There is Malni Vijayavotra Tantar, there is so much Swachand Tantar, there are many Tantars. Actually, we have 64 Tantras. Kashmir Shaivism derives its authenticity from 64 Tantras. And Shiv Siddhanta has 129 Tantras. that talk about duality. And these monastic tantras are 64 in number. If anybody wants to inquire about them, their names and
I
availability,
will
you can give
I
my
will follow it
number.
up with you.
And so far as this, the books I have translated into Kashmiri, they are available also in English and maybe in Hindi. That is Shiv Sutra and Ishwar Prativigyan Hridayam. And now I have translated, but it is yet to be published, Ispanda Karika. So I have translated these three books into Kashmiri, but Ispand Karika is yet to be published.
There is another message, sir. Steps can be taken by publishing and translating books in Tamil.
English and other languages. Now, if somebody is interested, if somebody knows Sanskrit and English, from that he can or she can translate into Tamil. That would be a very good idea.
Now, Professor, now I realize you are affectionately called as a Sastri in academic circles. Is it true?
No.
One of my contacts in the university mentioned about you, and it's really fascinating listening to your lecture today. And I'll talk to you again, and we'll see how we can continue this session later on, as we'd like to have more question and answer series.
Yeah.
So it's time is up now. It's more than 1.5 hours, and thank you once again, Professor Zaffar, for your time today. It was fascinating and very interesting. And I'm sure as and when we get any comments, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
We will sign off now, and
Okay.
we meet every Saturday, 7 to 8. And I'll keep you posted, Professor Zaffar, about our future programs.
Okay. Thank you.
We want to thank Sri Kanchimat, Kamakodi.tv, and of course our leading Tamil newspaper Dinamalar for covering our Kashmir awareness series every Saturday and giving more details. We thank also VDSP for the streaming. I think today we had a problem with connectivity issues. That's why we have to connect so many gadgets, and audio is not really great today. And we will go on and check with our YouTube how it worked out. Thank you, and I'll see you next Saturday.